Welcome to The Future is Women, Bridging, Bonding, and Building Conversation. My name is Erica Merritt, and I will be your host for this conversation. Please feel free to take a moment and introduce yourself to the other participants by putting your name and where you are joining us from in the chat, and any other greetings that you'd like to share, of course. We're so excited to see you all popping on. I love seeing familiar and new faces simultaneously. We want to start this time together with a land acknowledgement. We are broadcasting today from Cleveland, Ohio, a land with a deep and complex Indigenous history. Among the first known Indigenous communities in this region were the Erie people, who lived here before the mid 1600s. After the conflict with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, many were displaced, but their legacy endures. Ohio is the ancestral and contemporary homeland of many indigenous peoples, including the Shawnee, the Miami, the Wyandot, the Delaware or the Lenape, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and many others. Today, we honor their continued presence, we honor their knowledge, and we honor their enduring contributions, past and present, knowing that we benefit from both. If you're just joining us, feel free to say hello, tell us who you are, and tell us where you are joining us from. We're so excited to have all of you here. I get to tell you about Getting to We. Getting to We is so excited to bring our first bridging, bonding, and building conversation, our first virtual. It's not our first bridging, bonding, and building conversation. It's our first virtual bridging, bonding, and building conversation. Our strategic dialogue sections are designed to strengthen gender solidarity, to achieve racial and gender equity in places where we work, where we live, where we serve, where we play, and where we worship. Thank you for bringing your voice to this conversation, whether it is in the comments or just attentively listening or asking questions along the way. We encourage you to become a member of our GTW or Getting to We community, which you can do by simply signing up for our newsletter. It's free, and we promise not to inundate you with messages. We're only going to provide you with valuable resources and valuable information. Please help us to reach our goal of doubling our subscriber list by not only signing up yourself, but encouraging your network to sign up as well. You can check the chat for the link to make it easy. Thank you in advance for subscribing. And of course, again, be sure to spread the word. Before I turn our broadcast over to our moderator, you may wish to put your camera on speaker view. I know there are a lot of us on this call. We're going to spotlight the speakers as well, so that will make it easier for you to see everyone. Along the way, I want to encourage you to please put your questions and your comments in the chat box, and know that we will be monitoring that space during the conversation so that we can pull as many of your questions as we can. We are so excited to have this conversation with Gloria Edim, Kathy Sherbrooke, and MyKhanh Shelton. You can find the links to their websites with their bios in the chat box. Let's just say, in addition to all that you find on their websites, that these are phenomenal, phenomenal women. Many of them are probably women whose names you already know and whose work you may be familiar with. And others may be ones that you're getting to discover tonight. But you are absolutely in for a treat. So I am going to pass the proverbial baton.
Mm.
I'm going to take a moment to highlight our speakers to make it easier for you all to see them. And we are just going to dive right into our this evening's conversation.
All right. Thank you, Erica. And thank you, Debbie Plummer and Leah and the Getting to We community. I'm MyKhanh Shelton. I'm joining you from Los Angeles, and I'm one of the names you would not know because I'm not published authors like the speakers who are joining us today, who I'm so excited to be in conversation with. Just by way of a little bit of background, I spent most of my career as an in-house lawyer in film and television studios. So, from the, seat of the Hollywood studio lots that I worked on, at our best, we told stories on screen that would help people see and understand each other better. And then now, in my role as a mediator, I spend my days with people in conflict. I spend my days helping people tell their stories in ways that can help them see themselves, the conflict, or the other side a little bit differently so that they can come to resolution. And today I'm so excited to talk to both of you, Glory and Catherine, because Kathy, because I love stories so much and I love books and I have a deep appreciation for the mode that you express yourselves in. It's the written word, and how you tell your stories that can help us bridge, bond, and build stronger and healthier communities. So I'm so excited to be here to talk to you today. So hello again.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Hello,
All
thank you
right.
for having me.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to jump right in because I think we have a very short amount of time, and my outline here is about for a like 5-day retreat that I hope Debbie will invite us to do at some point. So I'm going to jump right into with a question that really gets at the fact that both of you work with stories that challenge how we see ourselves and others. Glory, can you share a moment when reading or amplifying someone's story changed your understanding of them or yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I grew up a huge bookworm. I read everything I could get my hands on, from Little Women to Maya Angelou, everything I could just like take in. And I was really drawn to memoirs at one point, especially when I was in college. So I'm thinking of Edwidge Dandy Cat's Brother, I'm Dying, Jesmyn Ward's The Men We Read. It's like these really powerful stories that left such a lasting impression because the authors were constantly being vulnerable and exposing it all, whether it was a family tragedy or, falling in love, coming of age. Like all these things made me feel more confident when it was time to tell my story and to be really clear and honest about who I was. I had read so much of people practicing the possibility of being completely transparent with our lives and like experiencing really difficult things. With Jesmyn Ward's story, she's talking about like losing so many members of her family and being the first to go to college and living in rural Mississippi. And then Edwidge Dandy Cat is, being an immigrant and being Haitian and just living in this beautiful space and wanting to like write her like fullest, truest story. So it all inspired me in so many ways. And I think that like if you read enough, you start to take on those traits a little bit. It makes you see like it's almost like you get like a mentor, but
Hmm.
you don't have to meet them. You can like read their words and it encourages you and it allows you to like feel a little bit more brave. And one moment you're reading it and then another moment you're like, oh, actually, maybe I can do this too. So that was like the first step of me thinking that like, okay, maybe I can be a writer, or maybe I can talk about the hard thing in my life, which was my mom's depression. It was like such a shameful, secret, quiet thing. And then years later, when I was like ready to be more bold and honest about that experience, I was able to write about it. And I know it's because I read those things very early on and it like set the example in my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you had those mentors so that you could write this book that I just loved. So thank you. Thank you for that. Kathy, let me ask you, when you were researching Lucy Stone, did you discover something that completely shifted how you understood her or that historical period?
For sure. So for people who don't know, Lucy Stone is a woman I wrote historical fiction about in a book called Leaving Coy's Hill. And Lucy Stone grew up in the 1800s. She was one of the first women ever in our country to speak out for women's rights. She started off as an abolitionist, and so was, trying to change so much about our country, starting, pre-Civil War. So in the earliest stages. So I had a lot to learn about that time. And one of the things that I was really surprised to uncover and and kind of helped me see people in a different way was, we have this cliche sometimes that women are often hardest on other women.
Mhm.
And that never really rang true for me in my professional career. I was always surrounded by a lot of very supportive women, but this often is a theme that comes up. And in fact, in Lucy Stone's time, women were really not happy about her standing up on stage and saying that women should have access to professional realms, that women should actually be allowed to speak in public. It was considered scandalous to speak in public if there were men in the room, that women should be educated beyond the eighth grade. There were women really opposed to this message, which at first didn't make sense to me, right? As a woman, who wouldn't want more rights?
Mhm.
But then as I dug deeper, I understood that these were women who were taught that their only value was in the home and their only value was raising their children, and that was their duty. And suddenly, if someone like Lucy Stone was going to come along, college educated, speaking in public, talking about women being doctors and lawyers, this this created fear in women that their value would be that they would be devalued, that they would no longer have a place. And so from in my storytelling, I realized that I had to come at their stories from where they were
Mm.
and not paint them as, backwards women who were somehow against women's rights. They were just, as I think, as a natural reaction, um, worried about how that meant they were going to show up in their lives. And so kind of learning to give the characters that I wrote about in that way some grace
Mhm.
and look at the world from their perspective. And so it took me a lot of research and reading to really fully understand that, but it really kind of changed my view on the whole period.
And did it feel like you could then write without judgment? Is that something that
Right. And
really?
that, yes, and that I think is key, in fiction. I mean, that yes, there are villains and that's interesting and fun, and I have some in my book. Um, but but most people are, generally trying to be good people, but they just may not, they may not behave in a way um that's consistent with each other. And so I did try and write about them with as much understanding as I could. These women who had 8 little kids hanging on to their dresses, and weren't, but weren't so supportive of Lucy Stone's message. So it taught me a lot.
So let me ask you both that question about, um, you know, feeling like we go in knowing someone's story, right, before we even actually hear it. How have you learned to challenge those first impressions or those impressions that, it might not be the first, they might be like firmly held, impressions. But then, learning to challenge those and to dig deeper and try to, understand those folks differently. Um, how have you learned to challenge those impressions that may have been misplaced, either in your own work or in your own life?
I mean, I think that's such a powerful question because I think so often our first impressions are shaped by our bias. It's like we've been taught like what to expect, and you go into a space, maybe you're raised in a certain community or you go to a certain school. There's all these things like you can project outwards, and it's just like built into our subconscious. So I try to really, as a writer, as a literary citizen, I try to approach everything from a space of curiosity and like embrace the uncertainty of life and have just like really open dialogue. I naturally like to be surprised and I want to hear people's perspectives. And so it's just a temperament that I've like cultivated over the years. And I just feel like life is so much richer that way. It's the same thing when you pick up a book and maybe if you don't judge it by its cover, you could actually have like just a rich experience because you're like, oh, this is new. Sometimes I'll go into a movie theater and not watch the trailer. Like I genuinely want to be surprised by things. And we're in a space where we're constantly scrolling and we just have access to so much information. It's nice to find moments in your life where you can just say, like, I don't know. You can ask questions. You can truly be curious to learn something new, and come at it from just like a very open-hearted perspective, open mindset. Um, but it's a practice, and I think you have to like really build those things into your life to do it. Um, yeah, but I feel like the best entryway is often art. Art allows for that curiosity to happen and just like that, just like the newness.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that it's a temperament that you've cultivated because sometimes it feels like, okay, like you just have that, optimistic outlook or that, that sense of, innate curiosity. But I love the idea that you can cultivate that and that you can, really build more into that. Can you speak to some of those practices that you have and maybe what forms of art because I said I hear you talking about art and maybe that is
Yeah.
a source.
Well, I'm like I'm biting my tongue too because I'm also like I am very prudent about certain things too. So it is truly it truly is a practice of just like letting go, and that's why because there's other areas in my life I tend to be more structured, but I think the art is I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm lucky to be surrounded by so many beautiful museums that are free to go to. We have the Natural Portrait Gallery, we have the Air and Space Museum. I also have a 5-year-old, so I take advantage a lot of the
Yeah.
museums and just the access to it. And it's like one of the games that we play is like we'll walk around a gallery and I'll say, pick a painting we should hang in the house. And he's like looking at this exquisite art, these like famous painters. He has no idea, but he's like, I like this Amy Sherrilden, painting. Like, I want to put this in the living room. And it's like, okay, we're having fun with it. We're being playful. But we're also appreciating the beauty of it too. Like, these are just like fabulous, artists that we have the access to. Like, we can like touch it. We're like this close. And there's I think you again like you have to find those moments of trying to be like even like sitting down and reading a book, as simple as
Mhm.
that is a practice that surprisingly people are doing that less and less, or listening to an audiobook, taking a long walk and listening to someone like read those words. I mean, immediately when Kathy was talking about Lucy Stone, I'm like, my instinct is to go into my phone and like think about that person, write that down, do the research later to learn more about that person. And the contemporary person to me was like, oh, like the original girl boss, like Lucy Stone, like she was like, you know, breaking these walls down, breaking the glass ceiling. And that's not a name that's familiar. I didn't know that name. And I would naturally want to go learn more about that person or read your book, do more about it. So like listen, finding those moments just in everyday, like, recently my son's like really into birds right now. So every time he picks something up, he's like, that sounds like a bird, that's a mockingbird, that's a this bird. And I'm just like, I don't know, but we're gonna follow this. And just like finding those moments as an adult to like follow those like moments of just being curious about something.
Yeah, and I
Oh,
loved what you said, Glory, about trying to find moments of surprise. Because I think, first impressions are they're hard to break because our mind is used to seeing patterns, right? We make sense of the world by seeing something and putting it in a box in a category, right? And that's kind of, it makes the world feel safe. And so when that's when something about that is different, or unexpected, it can make us suddenly feel unmoored.
Yeah.
But if we can flip that on its head and say, oh no, but how fun to be totally
Yep.
surprised, to have something pop out that you didn't expect, um, is something I really try to do, because it's really hard to, I mean, I think first, to break first impressions, you have to be aware that you're having
Mhm.
one, right?
Right.
You're making lots of assumptions, and then find a way to try and find surprise in that. And yeah, and I agree with you. Curiosity too is key for that.
Well, Kathy, you started talking about this when you thought, okay, well, I have an impression of how the women would have been supportive of Lucy Stone back in the day, right? And so that was, a different type of impression you had.
Right.
But
Yeah.
are there other ways that you've learned to challenge first impressions? I hear in that one, there's a lot of research that you do to learn and put yourself in the shoes of the people you might be learning about. How do you find that you do that in your day-to-day life? How do you keep yourself on your toes and challenge those impressions when you are finding that they might be biased and they might be informed by in ways that you don't want them to be?
Right. Um, it's hard, we take in, we're very sensory. I know I'm very visual, and so we often first see somebody and we make a lot of assumptions about how they look. Keep trying to remind myself that you can't really have any impression of somebody until you talk to them, or hear them talk. And if you have the opportunity to be in conversation, to try and remember to let them talk, first of all, ask questions, and maybe and pick a topic, that you would actually be interested to hear about. I think a lot of times we ask questions that are either meaningless, or, some line of discussion, like, I loved you, Glory, saying your son loves birds, whatever it is. Okay, tell me about that. How did you get into birding? Where did you learn about that? What's your favorite bird? And then it's a way to at least open up conversation, and then you hear how somebody thinks. Like, the topic isn't as important, as
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, as letting somebody share their thoughts, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you could be in an hour-long conversation.
That is such a good insight, and when you say it that way, it makes so much sense. Like learning how people think, learning how people approach the topic, and how they approach you in those conversations tells you more than the actual topic. So
Hmm.
I love that. Uh, Glory, can I turn to a story that I read in your book, Gather Me, that I was really moved by, and it's a story you shared about an interaction you had with your high school English teacher, Mr. Burns. Can you share that story, and then we'll have some discussion about it.
Yeah, you know what? I'll read a little bit from my book. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay, so just to give context, Mr. Burns was my AP English teacher in high school. He was very beloved. He was one of my favorite teachers, and we had a conversation that really changed like how I thought about um, just engaging with a work of fiction or nonfiction. Okay. At last, towards the end of the school year, we finally arrived at what I had been waiting for. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. I walked into class feeling good. As I took my seat, I imagined how impressed Mr. Burns would be when he realized that I was already an expert on this particular book. I was so excited to delve into it into a more structured way. I couldn't wait to hear what my classmates thought, and of course, what Mr. Burns himself thought about it. I was certain that he would love it as much as I did. So, said Mr. Burns. He held up a copy of the book and smiled. There are a lot of things to admire about this book, but I think we could all agree that Maya Angelou's grammar is not one of them. I don't think I heard a word he said after that. I was genuinely stunned of all the things he could have said to introduce this powerful, magnificent book, all the shocking and difficult and wonderful topics she explained, all the personal and painful and beautiful truths she had put on the page. This was the way my favorite teacher introduced her to our class. I knew Angelo's work was steeped in the African American oral tradition, and I found her prose memorizing. I was absolutely certain that every word, every sentence, and the cadence and the rhythm of her work had been weighed and considered and deliberately chosen. I believed her to be a genius way beyond someone like Salinger, and certainly at least on par with anyone else we had studied that year. And I couldn't believe that Mr. Burns would so casually dismiss her talent and craftsmanship, make her seem small and arrogant. So that was the moment for me that I was like, and when I tell you, like this was one of my favorite teachers in high school. He introduced me to so many incredible like works of art and like really taught me how to debate when it came to thinking about like a work of fiction and breaking it apart. So I was, and I had at that point, again, I was in high school. So my first time reading Maya Angelou, I was probably like 12 or like maybe 12 or 13, way too young. It definitely didn't understand it. So I was like, eager to just like pull it apart in this classroom and talk about it and just like, do what you do in high school, like learn how to adult and talk about like work. Um, but it was a transformative moment because I basically, when you read my book, I call him
Mhm.
out on it later on, and he's also taken aback because he kind of said it in like a flippant kind of way. Like I don't think he like understood the weight of it. And when I challenged him on it, he was like, "Okay, but why? Like I want you to tell me if you feel so strongly about this. I need you to like really articulate your why. Like I can see that you're flustered. I'm apologizing. I see I made a mistake, but I need you to be able to like speak up for yourself and challenge me on why I was wrong." And so that was like the beginning of just like me reevaluating authority and how I could speak back to an adult and like say that like I think you're wrong. I had never really done that. I was very keen about being perfect and being on honor roll, getting straight A's, not necessarily like going against the grain and speaking back to my teacher in that way or debating him in any way. So we have this really beautiful exchange in the end, and he's continued to be one of my favorite teachers. But it also reminded me that people aren't perfect, and like they might not see the value in something that you believe so strongly in. So Mr. Burns, for all his worth, was definitely like a life-changing moment for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with this audience. And it was so meaningful as I was preparing for this conversation because uh, you extended him so much grace. And you were 18, which is pretty remarkable because I kind of just hated him when I first read him. I was like, God, someone take this man's license, right? But a few pages in, then you're like, okay. But so, at this point, what have you learned about how we either invite people to share their stories, or inadvertently shut them down? Because I could have just as easily seen it go the other way, and he would have like shut that down in you. And I was like very nervous that that would have been well, clearly you're published and everything else, and you're like last laugh. But but it could have gone really badly, and that could have shut things down, and yet it didn't. And so, like,
Yeah.
what have you learned about how you either invite people to share those stories, or you inadvertently shut them down? And when you do, like, what do you do to open it back up?
I feel like at the end of the day, storytelling really becomes almost like a bridge to make people feel safe. It's so when something like exchange like that happens, especially if you're a teacher, like I think what he did was seize the opportunity and like reframe it and make me feel confident enough to like push back. And I am again, my son is very young. He's not in like high school just yet, but I pray that my son does have similar teachers that whether they make a mistake, they can be accountable, they can teach them to be open, to like not have this like blind obedience, but really like talk back and have a sense of agency and have a strong opinion. And that means like listening without interruption. It really means like leading with empathy, like really coming in and say like, okay, like I want to teach you something, but I also know that I don't know everything, and I want to find ways to make this right. And I think at the end of the day, despite that mistake, like he was very eager to make it right with me. And he also just saw my ability to be a writer. Like I think that was something that he nourished and made me feel like, okay, I can do this and I can, like he built my confidence in so many ways. So it's all of that is just an exchange. And that happens with students and teachers, but I also think that happens just like day to day with everyday people. Like we're all eager to like learn from one another. And if you can be open to that, you can have a pretty transformative experience.
Oh, it was beautiful. Thank you. Kathy, you've led an organization committed to removing barriers so all voices can thrive. Right? So you know something about creating safe spaces for storytelling. So let me ask you, how do you think we can create space for people to tell their stories in ways that build connection rather than defensiveness?
Yeah, thank you. So I so one of the key things I think in creating a safe space is having as many perspectives in the room as possible. Um, if anyone's been the lone woman at a business dinner, then all of a sudden you're speaking for all women and everything's more fraught and you don't have anybody nodding at you and saying, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about." And so having as many different perspectives around any table involving stories really helps. And at Grub Street is the organization. It's a creative writing organization that MyKhanh is referring to that I was lucky to be on the board of for a long time. Um, it took a long time to get that diversity around the table, and Debbie Plummer, who started Getting to We, really helped us see that the organization, no one is going to tell their best story unless they're getting feedback from and hearing stories from people very different um, than their own. And so that's the thing that I have found to be, if there was one thing that really helps create a safe space, it's that. The other is to, if we all also, anyone who wants to be a writer has to really appreciate rigor, right? And so learning to write and tell stories is often requires feedback. Is my story coming across? Are you hearing it? And so it's very easy to jump to the 10 things that are wrong with the story. And that also doesn't make people feel safe. And so one of the things I really learned as a student at Grub Street was start with the 5 things you love about the
Mm.
story, or 3 images that really stuck with you. And then you can move on to, hey, you know what though? Gosh, you had me going with this character, and oh, I was so disappointed not to hear more. Could you add more to that to the story? So starting with the positive,
Mhm.
because every story has positive, and getting that point across before diving into what could be done better. That really helps too.
That's such a good reminder. I mean, I experienced that for sure as a lawyer, and I can imagine even more so working with writers who crack open their heart for their audience,
Right.
for their reader, and that's got to be so scary.
It's
So,
so scary.
so scary. Yeah. I need to hear 10 things, 10 good things before like don't let
Exactly.
anyone come at me until
Exactly.
like,
I mean, I was a public speaker and I was a business person before writing, so public speaking was never an issue. But when I had to read my own creative writing out in class out loud, I couldn't breathe. I literally thought I was going to pass out. I was so terrified. It's really scary. And so, it's really important to create those safe spaces.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Erica coming on screen means we're almost to the Q&A section. But let me ask you about, you know, um, if we do want to understand each other across differences, and everybody who's logged on tonight, clearly, wants to do that. What questions do you think we could be asking, and what do you think we could be listening for in someone's story? And you touched on this a little bit earlier. You could be listening for how they think and how they're, approaching the conversation. Do you have other ways that you have found helpful to understand people across differences? Maybe Glory, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm going to go back to that, the practice of just trying to lead with empathy, just really trying to hold back any immediate judgments, because once we get to a space of judgment, it's like hard to like break that wall. And the questions that we can ask one another are just trying to get to the vulnerability, like to the, the really the heart of the story that you're trying to tell, or the person that you're trying to become. Um, yeah, I'm probably at a loss for words because it's such a big question, It's like,
Mm,
how do we approach that? Like, we clearly are in this very vulnerable time where everything feels very fraught. There's so much tension, there's so much uncertainty. So I think people are even walking around this anxiety. They don't even know how to just like approach anything now, because no one wants to say the wrong thing.
right.
And you actually have to like be willing to say something, whether it's like
Mhm.
right or wrong. You have to like, we all have to just like start with like this openness of, okay, like, how are you? And like
Mhm.
truly, when someone's
Right.
not just like fine, like truly, like, how are you? Like, what is happening? Like trying to like answer whatever the question is as honestly as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and getting into this is one of my girlfriends, she's also an author, and just like so incredible when it comes to her wellness. And like they're like little things, if someone says something that's like not funny, you don't find it funny, you don't laugh, right? Like sometimes you can play that like kind of performative thing where you just like do the thing because it's expected. And it's like, oh, like, or just you don't have to do anything. Like really trying to practice free will and do things
Yeah.
Mm,
that are
yeah.
authentic to you as possible, and not find it cringy, like sit with being uncomfortable and see what comes with that. And I've been trying to be in that practice too, of just trying to be as honest as possible with myself and then with others. And and see what comes of that. Like it's okay. It's
Mhm.
okay for us to be uncomfortable. It's okay with us to sit with uncertainty of what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're getting at like really breaking so many norms, like,
Yeah.
the polite laugh, the polite response, the expected things, and like really well,
Right.
beyond letting yourself, really like unlearning those
Yeah,
things that you
and
might be
honoring it.
perpetuate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay. And then the funny thing is I have so many conversations with my girlfriends now about all the unlearning that we're doing. And I just think about future generations, and that like I hope there isn't like they set the precedent of just like being completely honest and changing the way that we like have, especially when it comes to like young women. Like
Mhm.
I just want so much more of like that, breaking that perfectionist bubble, or trying to be like there's no perfection. You just
Yeah.
be yourself and accountable to all your actions, whether they're good or bad. Just like be yourself, and trying to be as genuine as possible.
Yeah. The thing I've been trying to unlearn in this, for myself, is trying not to win conversations anymore, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
Mhm.
Like the stakes are so high and they have been for so long. And I, for a long time, I approached every conversation. It's like, I'm going to convince people that this point of view, whether it's gun control or wait, name your topic, right? Is right? Because they have to see
Yeah.
this point of view or this idea, and it doesn't bring out vulnerable conversations very well. And so I've really been trying to tell myself, go in just to have a conversation, not with an agenda, and don't try to win it. Doesn't
Kathy,
work.
have you heard this really resonated with me when I read Adam Grant and how he describes that so he's a, behavioral psychologist and, big in the kind of professional development world. And all these studies, he looked at how people enter conversations and he's like, it all boils down to like people enter in one of three ways: as a prosecutor, a preacher, or a politician. And I was like, oh my gosh, all those things all the time for me is horrible, like
Yeah,
horrible.
right.
Right, but when you catch it, like now, right, you're just like, oh no, I'm going in as a, Kathy, what you were just saying, prosecutor. I'm going to
Right.
convince people that, right, that gun control and like over, here, I won't get political, but like, the ICE raids or whatever it is, right, going
Right.
on.
Whatever it is. Yeah, pick your
Yeah, the
topic.
pro or the preacher, like that's so wrong, like finger wagging at people, or the politician just trying to like, make nice and just get out of the conversation, right? But
Right.
like, instead, I think what you're saying, like you're really listening to understand, listening with
Yeah, and
curiosity.
maybe go in as I've never heard that. I love that three, and maybe there could be a fourth, which is go in as a potential friend,
No, I think go in as none of those things and
None of
go
those
in.
things.
I
And
think,
how do
yeah,
you just be as a, like maybe
yeah,
I could be this person's friend and that's it,
yeah,
you know?
I love it.
I don't know.
Hi, Erica. Friend.
Hi. I have loved listening to the three of you, and I'm excited to invite both myself and the rest of folks to join us more actively in this part of the conversation. And so I'm going to start. My first question for you both is, how do we, getting to we is really about, how do we build more social trust, right? How do we build more connection? And so I want to start with, how do we extend ourselves beyond our own circles? How do we
Yeah.
actively extend ourselves beyond our own circles?
Yeah, it's a really, really important question. There's so many ways. I mean, an obvious one is, or maybe it's not obvious, but literally, if you can get out in the world in places, whether that is whatever it is, a museum that may have a lot of people that are different than you, or you to talk to people who are of difference, and it doesn't have to be a major difference. Like I think a lot about young people, if you happen to have the opportunity because your friends bring over their young kids or whatever, to talk to people of different ages, different cultures, from different geographies. But if you don't find yourself in those positions, I think we are lucky to have a lot of access to eavesdropping is also a really good, it's a writerly tip. Listen to what other people are saying, even if you're not comfortable going in. But another version of eavesdropping are sort of, whatever it's podcasts or books or listening to people who are very different than you would expect yourself to listen to. So as an example, I joined this group trying to figure out like what the hell's going on in the world, where we force ourselves to listen to super right-wing podcasters. It's very painful, but we
Is this a club
listen.
or something? What are you
Hmm?
about to say? Is it like a virtual club and you like listen to together? Are you
Yeah.
this?
No,
Sounds like
we
Fight
get
Club podcast
we
style.
oh, you do have, yeah, so we get assignments and then every 2 weeks we gather and talk about it. And so and it doesn't have to be like whatever it is, just maybe some podcaster who's like, I don't know, someone who just sailed around the world. You're like, oh, I've never done that. Go listen to that person. Whatever it is, something that's very different outside your own experience. It's just amazing how much you can learn. And I know I can get in a rut sometimes, as a big reader, that there's certain kinds of books I like and certain kind of writers I like, and I read them over and over and over again. I've been trying to get myself to read very different kinds of books and listen to very different kinds of speakers, just because it just opens up the world.
Yeah, I'll plus one with that. I do that with literary events. Like I usually just go to like a variety of different book talks. So I'll do something that's like recently I went to go see oh my God, now I'm Ron Farrow, not Ron Farrow. He wrote the new biography of Mark Twain.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I don't
forgetting
remember his
I'm
name.
forgetting his name right now. I'll look it up and share later. I'll put it in the chat. But I went to go see him speak because I had just read Percival Everett's James,
Oh
and
yeah.
then he wrote this biography about Mark Twain, and it just made me curious about like Mark Twain's life. So I just like went to go listen to that. So it's not something I typically would have gone to, but I was curious. I was making connections, and I just like will go to my local bookstore and find something that's again like a little bit different. I haven't tried the right wing podcast, but I'm intrigued by that. I like
Mm.
really love that idea of like listening to an argument, not necessarily to win, but like to understand and also like sharpen my perspective. So if I do want to win in a policy way, like
Right, right.
I can know how to like pull that apart. But I do that a lot with like book talks, like just going randomly to things that maybe perhaps I wouldn't read and just like listening to the author. And it's something so special about listening to like the author talk about their book and the research and just like the background, like the behind the scenes of writing something. Especially when it's like nonfiction or like politically aligned.
Mm,
I really enjoy that.
yeah.
Lori, in those spaces, you were talking about, tapping into books and other things. Are there ways through that you've been able to expand your circle?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
what have you
I
found in that space?
yeah, yes, I actually have because probably you could tell on this call, I'm very chatty. So like I will I will talk to people next to me. Most recently, I just joined my school board at my for my son's school. He goes to bilingual school, so there's like a lot of different parents that there's some of them are in foreign service and they're just like it's really different from my day to day. And so I do my best to just introduce myself and make conversation. And I also think it's the thing of going to the same place consistently. Like I typically go to like the same bookstore. So like I know the booksellers and there's like I know the barista. Like I think we have to also get into the practice of like, really appreciating our third spaces, whether that's like your church community or your local book club or the bike shop, the ice cream shop, just like something that you go to consistently and like try to really engage with people and make like soft friendships. Like it's not someone you see every day or you do something with them all the time, but you see them, they recognize you, and you start having conversations, and it evolves from there. So I tend to be like a creature of habit, like going back to the same places and trying to connect with people.
So thank you both. There's a question in the chat for Kathy.
Mhm.
This Renata says, in your work, you've developed research practices that you let you portray women from very different eras without judging their choices. Could you share one or two specific techniques that you rely on to stay curious and suspend judgment? And then suggest how those same techniques might help younger or older women mentoring conversations with kind of that same open-minded and intergenerational curiosity.
Mm.
Just
Wow.
a little thing.
Small
Yeah.
question. It's a great question.
It is a
Thank
great
you.
question.
But it's a big one. Um, so I'll really take this from the storyteller's perspective, which is, since you started with sort of the book and the research that I do, is really needing to understand any character that I put in a book. So I'll give a specific example. The reason, Glory, you'd never heard of Lucy Stone is, even though she became one of the leaders of the women's movement right alongside Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, is that those other two ladies wrote Lucy Stone out of history after they had a big falling out because they decided not to support the 15th Amendment, which gave Black men the vote before women. And Lucy was not willing to abandon the 15th Amendment. And so they wrote her out of history. So I discover this, and it makes me kind of angry, right, at them. But they were friends and they were in discussion. So I had to force myself, I had to write dialogue from Susan B. Anthony's position. And then I had to write dialogue from Elizabeth Cady Stanton's point of view. So I had to get into their head and create their arguments and create them in a convincing way, because no conversation is interesting if it's obvious that one person's right, right? And so that really helped me, even if I didn't fundamentally agree with them, I got into their shoes. And so I think, and it's a really powerful mode that I do think other people can use. There's an incredible organization called, oh my God, I'm going to forget the name of it now, started by Colin McCann. And it's a methodology where two people meet each other and tell each other their stories. And then you have to, like, if Glory and I are doing this, we may have never met before. And then I have to stand up and I have to tell Glory's story.
Oh,
in the
Okay.
first person. So you have to really listen and you have to have empathized with what they're saying. And so I think even if that's not done in a formal way, I think it's a good technique to say to young people or any people kind of it's literally putting yourself in that person's shoes. Okay, instead of telling me what a jerk that person is, tell me who that person is. Like for a minute, be that person. And because everybody has their own thing, and so it's just kind of amazing how much you can learn when you force yourself to be that person.
I love that.
Welcome to the world of mediation, Kathy.
Yeah.
Yes, you
And
deal with this all day long, right?
All day long, but that's exactly right. I'll plus one to everything you all are saying. And then one thing that I am like practicing a lot in mediation and just kind of in all conversation around these polarized times, just asking myself, what is the fear underneath this? Like there could be somebody just yelling
Yeah,
because we're fighting over money. If not we, if two people are just fighting over, right, money, and they're just going at each other, like to step back and it's like, oh, what is the fear
what is this
underlying
really about? Yeah.
this?
right.
What are they afraid of, right? What is, and if we could tap into what they're afraid of,
Hmm.
or making sure that we're not arguing in a way that makes them more afraid, right? You
Exactly.
could be doing like damage in the way that you're doing, that you're, kind of cultivating that conversation.
Right.
So I think that putting yourself that in the other person's shoes is so helpful.
Thank you. It makes me think of the concept of other-centered perspective taking, right? So thinking about at least as best we can to your points, right? Imagining what someone else's experience might be, because so often what we're doing is imagining ourselves in that person's situation, which sometimes can be helpful and sometimes not so much. And so, really trying to imagine what it must be like through their experience, through their lens, and the meaning that they are making of whatever it is, can be a really powerful approach.
Right.
There's a question for Glory here as well about the concept of being a literary citizen. So that this person, Mia, would love to hear more about the term literary citizen and would love to know what it means, not just ultimately to you, Glory, but to each of you, and whether that or not there's a concept of being a responsible literary citizen and what that might look like.
I mean, I think when I think of literary citizenship, just like actively participating and supporting the literary community, whether that's on a local level, your local library, your local bookstore, on a national level where you're supporting authors across genres and making sure that like books are diverse and they have, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking primarily around participation, and like I'm based in DC and I believe so much in supporting like the library and independent bookstores. I will I always say those things. And that's part of just like what I've adopted as an author. And it's a person who sees just like how transformative these spaces can be for young people. How I write in my memoir so much about like growing up in the library. My mom was able to get citizenship because she went to the library to fill out her forms. It's like such an incredible resource. And to participate in that is like to be truly part of your community. So that's how I define it. I would love to hear what other people think of Kathy. Like, how would you define that?
Yeah, very much what you said. Putting in the effort to hold up other authors and support them and show up for their author talks. I love when you said that, and how whatever way you communicate with your networks to let them know about, in this case, books that you love. I think we can all be really good artistic citizens. When you see something, whatever it is, an indie movie or go to a show that really moves you to share that to not assume that everyone already knows about it, or that your opinion about it doesn't matter, because we all need this art to be lifted up in the world, especially now.
Me kind of just offering any space if you wanted to jump in here.
I am, and I'm also scrolling the Q&A to make sure that we captured all the questions. There's one from Lori Albright, and there's a nuance to that question that gets back to the Lucy Stone experience you had writing about her, Kathy. And Lori wonders if that process might be applicable with people in our current political climate who feel like they come from a different culture and or time. She's asking about your exploration of the culture of the women who were upset with Lucy Stone. Is there something about that process that might be applicable with people in our current political climate? So I know we talked a lot about a lot on
Yeah.
that theme, but if there's anything you wanted to add about, that particular in this political climate.
Yeah, sadly, there's so much that's relevant about that to right now. I think one of the things that I really learned from Lucy Stone, and why I fell in love with her, is that she really appreciated that culture runs deep. People's beliefs come from generations of familial beliefs often. It's like the old iceberg analogy, right? Like anyone we see, like we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot underneath. And sometimes people break off, like a sheep of ice breaks off and goes rogue. But most people they're just digging into generations of beliefs. And so Lucy Stone understood that. And again, like men, I mean, just, oh my God, it wasn't illegal for a husband to rape a wife. That just wasn't there. Women became the possession of their husbands. That was just how it was. And Lucy Stone understood that. So when she was speaking to men, and she mostly spoke to men who came to her talks because they wanted to know what this horrible creature must look like a woman who dared speak in public. And she didn't berate them. She just basically treated them like good people who would want to be better people. Doesn't everyone want to be a better person? And so let me just share with you. And she would connect with them. A lot of them, let's say, read the Bible. So she would talk about, okay, let's talk about how the Bible, approaches, or whatever it is. And was just very disarming, because she assumed that people meant good, and then shared with them her wealth of ideas. And just, while some of them were literally throwing books and tomatoes at her. And I learned a lot from reading about her and her courage in doing that. And it worked. It really worked. She would end up having men who came to throw things at her, like protect her and carry her away so she wouldn't get further injured, and won people over, because she truly believed that people were trying to be good.
Assuming good intent is
Yeah.
is a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, if we can.
That I was just gonna say that feels like a really good segue to a anonymous question that I received about really this moment. So this person said that they desire to bravely step into empathy, but they find themselves really trying to manage their energy in this moment because there's so much going on and it's so hard. And it can feel like a risk, right? Like they may be wasting their empathy on people who would steal their joy. And so I wonder, if any of you have any thoughts about how to navigate extending empathy and grace in this moment, especially in instances where folks are exhausted and have a limited supply, and also maybe interacting with people who they know actually don't uh, have positive intent.
Yeah. I think that's so, so, so important. And we have to protect ourselves. We just do. And it does take a lot of energy. And, all these things I'm saying I try to do, I do them on good days. And then there are a lot of days when I crawl into my cave and don't come out. Because I just don't feel I can do it. Or I know that there are people I don't talk to anymore because I just know they're going to sap my energy and there's not a positive outcome. So I really do think it's important to protect our energy and then show up when we feel like we're good and ready to show up in a positive way. And that may be once a year, everyone has different battery levels and it's key to protect that, I think.
Yeah, I'm probably processing this too and thinking about ways to invest my energy and time in an intentional and authentic way. And I think there's something to be said about, I'm thinking what you said earlier, Kathy, about like not trying to win people over. Like you don't
Mm,
want to, and if people are committed to like misunderstanding you or not seeing your purview, maybe that's not where your attention should go. Perhaps it's like working with young people, where perhaps it's like finding other sources of people that are in need that can like will appreciate your investment in your time and they'll feel reciprocal and you'll feel good. Like I don't think we need to go out and like find people to convert over. I think we just need to find the people that are willing to listen that might be outside of our immediate circles. But I don't know, I don't think like I'm trying to, and this is, I think I'm processing it out loud, like the sacrifices that need to be made for change, like that is clearly um that's a thing. Like we have to, there will need to be like some sacrifices, especially in the world that we're living in, but like not at like the detriment of our like soul and integrity.
mm,
Like, you know what I mean? Like
right.
it has to be some balance of just like I'm pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, but I'm not doing it at the expense of like my mind and my soul and my energy. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
And there's so many ways, like you were saying, Gloria, to meet people who think differently than we do that bring joy, like
Yeah.
going to a book talk or something that you love as an experience. And this is really silly, but I'm on Martha's Vineyard right now, and Jaws just had its 50th anniversary, and it's where this island is where it was filmed. And so we all went to this big outdoor showing of it, and there was so much joy, right? It's just this movie from 50 years ago, but we were all like little kids again. So, and I met so many people from all different backgrounds because we all just love this movie. And so, it doesn't always have to meeting people who are different doesn't always have to be fraught at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
So
yeah.
finding
That's what
ways
I'm
to
trying
do
to get
that.
at. Like, it doesn't mean like you have to like go to like the extreme opposite of
Yeah.
difference, where someone who's like violent and hateful towards you in order
Right.
to make that difference. And I feel like we're constantly in these like two binary spaces, like it has to be all or nothing. It's like you don't have to like self-sacrifice yourself in order to make a difference. It can be smaller, more intentional, more meaning. And I'm still processing this too. And I feel a lot of responsibility because of my platform, but also I'm a person. Like I'm
Mm,
not like an institution or this huge corporation, right? So it's like, how do I balance those things without sacrificing myself? But I also want to do good in the world and I want to help and I want to do as much as possible. It's so hard for every person. Like literally, I feel like it's so hard.
mm,
I agree with everything, and I mean beyond agreeing, like I really, really resonate with what each of you is saying. And then I guess the one thing that I would add is I think there is something to building conflict resilience,
Mm,
and if we have not kind of figured out how to handle conflict well, it could be really, really injurious. It could really take us out of a moment where we need to be in, right? I mean,
mm,
yes,
yeah.
we need to pass the baton. Yes, we need to care for ourselves. And if we all do that, then we're probably in a heap of trouble. So how do we build our conflict resilience? And like, what are those exercises we need to do? Whether it's, okay, this person who's just spewing hate, I'm going to imagine them as a baby. And like, they were not told enough. You know what I mean? Like, I just have to like start telling myself, like, okay, so that I can stay in the conversation. And then I think, figuring out the bonding part so that, even so that the group that you're within, that you have the bonds. If this isn't the moment to take the stands on certain things, but there is somebody willing to do it. And so how can I do everything to support the person who is right now is willing to do it?
Mm.
So, I mean, that's how because I felt very guilty, like being at a complete loss and not knowing what to do, and just wanting to crawl up under my desk. So, I've been thinking about like, what are the things, what am I building towards? And
Mm.
I kind of just call it my own conflict resilience.
I love that. Thank you
I
for
do
sharing
too.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Conflict resilience.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we have time for just this one last question, which is, what is something that inspires you to know that the future is indeed women? What inspires you to know that the future is indeed women?
Well, I'm gonna continue to echo young people. Like I love to work with young people and seeing young girls feel powerful, really like being fully embodied, having their agency, and like moving in this space that goes beyond performance. They're really just present. And it just that lights me up. Like I love seeing young women just feel powerful. And that
Mm.
makes me feel like, one day we will have that female president. One day we will have like all these ceilings that we're constantly, saying, we're, oh, the ceiling's gonna be broken. It's gonna be like shattered and done, like I'm just ready for those things to happen. And I just feel like it's like sitting with future generations and we just need to support and like uplift them as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that. So when I think about the future being women, and what inspires me, I go to nature. Mother Nature. Nature is feminine, and nature has this way of healing itself every time. It will not be held down, and anything that nurtures, which is also inherently feminine, and that's nature. That's what survives in the end. And so I think if we can lean on each other and take those lessons from nature and and really trust in that and in her lessons, we will get there. It's not
Yeah.
always pretty. There are storms too, but we'll get there. I really believe that.
Well, I'll take it really personally and say that my daughters, I have two. One of them is here who asked you a question, Mia. And then, they have, and I think they're part of a generation that has an ability to speak truth to power, but in this
Mm.
way that is just with so much more love and humor than I have seen, other people be able to do. And so I'm really inspired by that.
I love that.
Your mom's doing a great job.
Thank you, Glory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you, MyKhanh. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Glory. Thank you all so much for this conversation, this rich conversation. And to all of you who are joining us, uh, just want to share a few things as we move toward closing out our time together this evening. So I want to tell you a little bit about Getting to We and the work of the organization. And so, again, I want to reinforce that we believe that gender solidarity is key to addressing the inclusion and equity challenges of our time. And we know that most of you who are on this call share this widely uh, ambitious goal of eradicating racism and gender inequities. This conversation absolutely revealed the complexities of building trust and understanding across racial and other lines of difference, as well as the shared responsibility that we all have to dismantle systemic racism and gender inequality. We want to take a moment to share some tools and resources because we want you to keep this conversation going, right? Uh, to build social trust, to deepen gender solidarity, and to move us all in the right direction of racial and gender equity. So in the chat, you're going to find a link to our resource page where you will find, among other things, a handout. Oh, of course. Oh, I just disappeared. Okay, so you can't see that actually because of my background, but I promise there is a resource there that provides the swim framework, and it's the swimming on dry land strategy. And the S in swim stands for strategy or a series of related activities designed for meaningful impact. The W is for the why or the driving behaviors behind or the purpose behind the desired outcome. The I is for investment because this requires something of each of us. And that's about making the doing what we need to do in order to execute on the strategy successfully. And then the M is how will we measure that, right? What are the metrics or how will the impact that we have be measured? So I want to encourage you to grab that resource as well as checking out some of the other resources that we offer through Getting to We, because sometimes as women it feels like we are swimming on dry land, and this framework really gives us a blueprint, right? So for those things that we can do to begin to build social trust where we live, so in our communities, where we work, where we serve, where we socialize, and where we worship. And it really is about being intentional. I think sometimes we're looking for things that make a big splash. And what we really need to do is set our intention and then work it, right? Actually execute on it. It's step by step, it's choice by choice, it's action by action.
Yeah.
Also on that resource page, you're going to find a comprehensive list of women supporting women organizations because we can't do this alone. And so we want to invite you to put in the chat any recommendations and organizations that you support that support racial and gender equity. So feel free to drop your favorite organizations in the chat so that we can make sure that they're on our list, and you can share them with others who may not be familiar with them just yet. In addition to that, speaking of women supporting other women, I want to encourage you to grab the books of our guests. So please make sure, and Aaliyah will drop those links in the chat again to make it easy. And Glory's got Gather
book.
Me right there, ready for us.
Shame on me.
And I know many of you are intrigued about Kathy's book, so be sure to grab that as well. And then finally, our goal at Getting to We is to sponsor experiences like these conversations and to bring learning resources for developing a me to we mindset and the me to we skill sets that we really need right now and in the future so that we can turn us and them into we. You can support us by making a tax-deductible donation. We are grateful for any amount that fits your budget. You can find the donation link in the chat as well. or you can simply go to the Getting to We website. Again, please share our newsletter with your network. Thank you, thank you, thank you to MyKhanh, to Kathy, and to Glory for joining us. And thank you all for joining our conversation. And we want you to have a great rest of your day and bring more love and grace into the world. Have a wonderful,
Well
wonderful
done.
evening.
Thank you,
Bye,
Erica.
everybody. Thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Debbie Plummer.